friends. This is Caitlin from Caitlin Annalie Cards, and I am here to help you ring in the fall crafting time with possum stamps. I'm going to be combining Hey Pumpkin, which is, let's be honest, probably my favorite stamp set Possum Stamps has so far, with the Coffee Besties, because it doesn't get any better than coffee with your bestie. And I'm going to combine both of those stamp sets with some of my favorite sequin mixes to create a really fun pumpkin spice themed shaker card. So I'm going to be going in with a piece of craft, a piece of white cardstock, and then some of my favorite cardstock to color with Copics, but of course you could use whatever coloring medium you prefer. And I grabbed one of the single coffee bean stamps from the Coffee Besties, and I'm just going in with that one stamp on my white heavyweight cardstock. And you can see I'm going to be cutting out my frame with just a plain generic oval die, and I'm using my die to make sure that I have enough coffee beans stamped on the background that even with all the sequins moving around, you're gonna see them. So once I had that done, I set that aside and I stamped down my pumpkins, my little kitten in a mug. We're gonna make that a cute little spooky black cat, and the pile of coffee beans. And we're going to stamp all that on one side, flip my paper around and stamp it on the other. So I didn't need two cats in a mug, but I figured, just in case I messed up coloring on one, why not just stamp all three of them 2 times, because I knew I wanted 2 pumpkin piles and 2 coffee bean piles. So I stamped all those out, and then it was time to get to work with my Copics. And I have to be honest with you, Copic coloring pumpkins is probably one of my absolute favorite things. I love coloring pumpkins. I'm just so excited for fall. And I know that it's still summer, but that's the nice thing about crafters is we get to prepare for the next season early. And so I get to start celebrating fall in the middle of summertime. So I'm going in with my orange or YR markers, and I'm starting to create those shadows in the areas where one of the lobes of the pumpkin would kind of be in front of another. And then I also like to create almost a ring effect around that center section of the pumpkin. So you can see I'm putting in normal shadows on the side, and then I do kind of 2 U-shaped lines on that center one, and then start to blend them towards each other. And I'll do the same kind of shading for all of the pumpkins. I only showed one pile being colored because I figured that was just a lot of pumpkins if you had to watch me do both. But at least with all these different shapes, you can kind of see how I adapt the same strategy to fit each different unique shape of these pumpkins. And I love that they're not just a normal standard sized pumpkin. I love that there's some shorties, that one's a little bit taller, one's a little bit more round. I'm a fan of the oddball pumpkins in real life too. I love a good weird guy pumpkin. Those are my favorites. The ones that nobody else wants at the pumpkin patch are the ones that usually end up coming home with me. Because I'm such a sucker for fall, I also think it's really fun to take stamp sets that are not necessarily fall themed, like the Coffee Besties, and kind of use them to fit whatever season you want, particularly if it happens to be fall. But I love that we can take any of those coffee cups from the Coffee Besties and add it to candy canes or pumpkins or hearts and cupcakes, and you could easily spin it for any kind of holiday. I love having stamps like that in my stash because you can literally pull them out and make them work for anything, even a birthday. I have plenty of friends that are coffee addicts that would love that sweet little kitten in a mug as a birthday card. So I went in with some e-markers to color in the stems, and then I also used a little bit of a darker shade combination to color in my coffee beans. And for those, I'm keeping it really simple. There isn't a ton of room to work with, so I still did manage to squeeze 3 colors in, but you could definitely get away with a 2-color blend on these, just putting that shading right through the middle. So you can see I did the ones on the other side of the paper, and now I'm going in to color my mug One of my cats stamped a little cleaner than the other, so I just picked the one I liked better, and that's the one we're coloring in. So I'm using a lot of the same shades that I used on my pumpkins for my mug, and I just thought it would be nice to keep the colors kind of continuous throughout and go for a more monochromatic look with this one. And you can also see that I left the edges of the cup white, and that just helps to give that idea of reflective light where a curved object turns away from you and catches the edge of the light and reflects it back. So I'm going over those areas with my lightest marker to create a nice little highlight, as well as keeping a brighter highlight right at the very center of the mug. Now this cute little kitten has on those glasses, and I decided to make them match and give them orange glasses as well. And it wouldn't be Halloween without a black cat. So I'm going in with some dark neutral gray markers to shade in the kitten. But again, this set is so fun because you could color it literally to be any cat. If your recipient has a cat, you could make it theirs, which would be a really fun way to personalize it. Now I find that coloring with darker markers over the eyes and nose of an animal kind of makes it lose some of its character. So even though this is supposed to be a black cat, you'll see over the eyes I'm going to use a very light gray marker. And I also added just a tint of a very light blue to kind of give the illusion of the glass in those glasses. Then I colored in the whipped cream with just some very soft creamy markers, added a little bit of white gel pen to the eyes, as well as highlights to the side of the mug. And I'm going to be doing a mixture of fussy cutting and die cutting for this one. I wanted my pumpkins to be fussy cut so that they look more like true background pieces up against the shaker, but I wanted the coffee beans and the mug to stand out a little bit more. So I thought that die cutting them and leaving that white border would really help them to stand apart without having to make them dimensional. You could always add foam tape or foam squares to the back of them and pop them up, especially if you weren't going to make a shaker card out of this, and that way it would have more dimension. But because I'm going to be adding foam on the back of my frame, I didn't want to add an even thicker layer of foam on the front of my card. So I'm going to be adhering these down flat and using that white border just to help differentiate between all of my layers. So I'm making sure that I have enough room at the bottom of my card and kind of using my images as a guide now for where I should place my die. And I'm just going to tape that down with some low tack adhesive tape and run that through my die cutting machine and create my window. You could obviously also do this with any shape that you want. I just thought the oval was fun and a little bit different, but you can use whatever dies you have on hand, whatever makes you happy. So once I had my frame prepped, we're going to take some thin strips of foam tape. Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. We're going to take some leftover packaging because I'm pretty sure most of us have some of that laying around, some stamp packaging. And I'm going to just tear it apart so I have one single side. We're going to trim that down to be a little bit smaller than my A2 sized card panel. And I should also mention that my white cardstock is trimmed down just maybe 1/8 of an inch in both directions, shorter than an A2 sized as well. And that's just to give me a little bit of extra wiggle room and chance to not have to deal with trimming anything when I place the larger craft piece on top. So I'm putting down some liquid glue and adhering my leftover packaging, just pressing that into that liquid glue, and it dries pretty quick. And then I needed a sentiment. So I grabbed the Hey Pumpkin sentiment from the Hey Pumpkin stamps, stamped that on my craft cardstock in just plain black ink. And now it's time to go in with some foam tape. And I'm just using a really thin tape. I'm pre-measuring it out, just turning my tape on the side. And I always cut a little bit bigger, a little longer than I need. I also went right up against the window at the top, and I gave myself a little bit of room away from the window at the bottom, so there's kind of a well for some of those sequins to bury down into behind those pumpkins so that when you shake it, there's more in there than you think. And then I added the foam tape around the edges, creating just a frame all the way around and like a rectangle, and as well as adding tiny little pieces into each of those corners just to make sure that nothing gets squished down in shipping. So once you remove the tape backing, it's time to get to work on filling in the shaker. This is one of my favorite parts. I took a little bit of anti-static and rubbed that on the edge of the foam tape, and then I poured in my roasted coffee sequin mix and my campfire sequin mix. And when I turned it around to look at it, it just made me so happy. Look at all that sparkle. So then I added my pumpkins. I put the one big set over on, it's the same stamp that I did twice. I just only colored 3 of the pumpkins on one of them and all 4 on the other. And we're going to place that coffee mug right over the top so that you don't even realize that they're the same cards stamps repeating. I put my coffee mug in place just to make sure that my coffee beans were in the right spot, and then glued down my little mug into place. And then all this needs is a regular card base to glue straight onto, and you are ready to go. This is so sweet. I'm in love with how it turned out, and I hope that it gets you excited for some fall fun with Possum Stamps. Thanks for hanging out today, and I hope you have an amazing week. As always, happy crafting.